You know the name. You've definitely heard the whispers. The Gilgo Beach killer.
Hmm.
For what, over a decade now,
Hmm.
this chilling question has just hung over Long Island. It's like a dark shadow, stretching across these shores that seem so peaceful otherwise.
Yeah.
Welcome to the deep dive. We take the really complex stuff, the detailed stories, and we try to make them clear.
And today, it's the Long Island serial killer case. LISK.
Exactly. We're pulling apart the layers, trying to give you a really sharp understanding of this, well, this haunting mystery.
It's a case that's really burrowed its way into the public mind, hasn't it? And, well, for good reason. The details are incredibly disturbing.
They really are.
The timeline is just sprawling, and for so many years, the truth felt, well, just out of reach.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Picture this. December 2010.
Right.
It's a routine training exercise. Desolate stretch of Gilgo Beach. You've got Officer John Malia and his canine partner, Blue.
Just a normal day, supposedly.
Exactly, but instead of just a drill, Blue's nose leads them to something.
Sickening.
A burlap sack.
And inside.
Human remains. Just like that, the isolation of that place takes on this really sinister new meaning.
And it didn't stop there, did it? Within days.
No, within days, that single horrific discovery just multiplied. 3 more bodies.
Also in burlap sacks.
Each one also concealed in burlap. This wasn't some isolated tragedy. This felt, I don't know, calculated, way more calculated.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what does wrapping the bodies in burlap suggest? Right from the start, investigators must have been thinking about the killer's methods.
Well, yeah. And those first 4 victims, they were identified as Melissa Barthelemy, Maureen Brainard-Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello.
Young women.
Young women, yeah. Their lives tragically kind of intersecting because they mostly worked as escorts, advertising online, like on Craigslist back then. And their disappearances, they span from 2007 right up to 2010.
So think about those years. It's like a pattern was forming right there, in plain sight almost, but nobody saw it yet.
Exactly. Unseen.
And the fact that these women, similar backgrounds, found together, wrapped the same way, it just screams deliberate act, doesn't it?
It does.
It suggests the killer wasn't just, ending lives. There was some kind of disturbing ritual or a method involved.
But the horror, it didn't stop there. It wasn't confined to just those initial 4.
No, the body count kept climbing.
It eventually climbed to 10. 10 individuals. Among them, an unidentified Asian male, probably late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, estimated 17, 23, I think. And then a toddler.
A toddler. And the child's mother, also unidentified for a long time.
So this just drastically expanded the timeline, didn't it? And the scope of the tragedy.
Pushed the start of these crimes potentially way back, maybe 1996, even earlier.
It's incredible. Suddenly, Long Island, that picture of suburban quiet.
Yeah, suddenly it's synonymous with something terrifying, like a graveyard.
The diversity of those later victims, too. The man, the child, the mother.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? Does it suggest the killer's motivations change? Or maybe something else?
That's a huge question.
And the unidentified victims just add this heartbreaking layer of anonymity, The fact they weren't identified for so long, it suggests they might have been particularly vulnerable, maybe outside typical social circles.
Which could have implications for how they were targeted.
Exactly. How they were targeted and why. It makes it harder.
So you have to ask, right? Who were these people? Beyond the headlines, beyond the grim statistics, what was the thread, the dark connection that bound their fates together over so many years?
That is the enduring question, isn't it? It's the one that's fueled just countless hours of investigation, speculation, everything.
And the disappearance of Shanann Gilbert. That really threw this case into high gear. May 1st, 2010.
Right. She vanished after a client call in Oak Beach, which is just, a stone's throw from where the first bodies were eventually found?
Pretty much, yeah. And we know she made that frantic 23-minute 911 call.
The call that just cut off abruptly.
Yeah. And her body wasn't actually found until December 2011, over a year later.
And the ruling was accidental drowning, wasn't it?
It was, officially. But her family, especially her mother, Mari, fought that relentlessly. They never believed it. And it's still this point of intense debate.
Why do you think Shanann's disappearance was so crucial? I mean, in uncovering the bigger picture here.
Well, it really acted as the catalyst, didn't it?
Yeah, her disappearance prompted that much wider search of the area, the search that actually led to finding the other victims.
Right.
And it also kind of unfortunately highlighted potential problems in how missing persons cases were handled initially, especially, cases involving sex workers.
That stigma is definitely part of the story. Okay, let's zoom in on those first 4 women found in 2010. Melissa Barthelemy.
Okay.
She disappeared July 12, 2009, met a client in Manhattan, then vanished. But what makes her case just particularly chilling?
The phone calls.
The taunting phone calls. Her younger sister received calls from Melissa's own phone after she went missing.
Unbelievable. And they traced them.
Traced them back to Midtown Manhattan. Think about the sheer audacity of that. The cruelty.
Those calls are deeply disturbing. They suggest a killer who wasn't just about the act of murder itself, but also about inflicting this psychological torment on the victim's family.
Yeah.
It's really a hallmark of a particularly sadistic and, potentially organized offender, someone who plans.
Then there's Maureen Brainard-Barnes, missing much earlier, since November 9th, 2007.
Right, after a trip to New York City.
Her remains found in 2010 with the others, and tragically, evidence showed she'd been strangled.
The fact that her disappearance was way back in 2007, before the others found at that specific time, what does that tell us?
Well, it suggests the killer might have been active for longer than they first thought, right?
Yeah, Maureen's case definitely points to that possibility. And the cause of death, strangulation, unfortunately aligns with what they later found for some of the other victims. It suggests a possible consistency in his method. Or their method, we don't know for sure yet.
Good point. Then Megan Waterman, vanished June 6, 2010. Left a hotel, meeting a client.
And Amberlynn Costello, last seen September 2, 2010. Getting into a client's car.
Both of their remains also discovered in December 2010 with Melissa and Maureen. That cluster of disappearances, Megan and Amber in 2010, found relatively quickly after Melissa in 2009. What might have been happening then?
That tighter time frame? Well, it could indicate a period of increased activity for the killer. Maybe something changed in their personal life. Or just opportunity. Maybe even a shift in how they were targeting victims.
So many possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the just haunting mystery of the unidentified victim.
Mm-hmm. The ones found later, in 2011.
The remains of the young Asian man. The toddler thought to be his daughter. And the child's mother. We didn't even know their names for so long. Some still unidentified. What kind of challenges does that lack of ID pose for investigators?
Oh, it's a huge hurdle. A massive one. It makes it incredibly difficult to piece together their backgrounds, their connections. Any potential links they might have had to the other victims or, to a possible suspect.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Exactly. And those missing pieces might hold really crucial clues.
So the investigation itself, codenamed Operation Flytrap, it was this massive undertaking, right? Multiple agencies involved.
Suffolk County Police, FBI, New York State Police.
Yeah.
And they received something like over 40,000 tips.
40,000. Just imagine sifting through that volume of information.
Absolutely. I mean, while tons of tips can be helpful, it also presents this monumental challenge. How do you prioritize? How do you verify? Where do you put the resources?
Like searching for a needle in like 40,000 haystacks.
Pretty much, yeah. Multiplied tens of thousands of times.
Okay, so early on, some key clues did emerge. The burlap sacks, we mentioned them.
Right.
They were used to wrap multiple victims. That detail really stood out. What did that suggest to you?
The burlap it's a particularly interesting detail. It suggests, well, a degree of planning, right? And a specific method of concealment.
Yeah.
It could also hint at a profession, maybe? Or just access to materials that aren't, readily available to everyone. Maybe someone in agriculture, landscaping, something like that.
Farmer.
Yeah.
Someone who works outdoors.
Possibly. Or just someone with easy access to that kind of material.
And the location where the bodies were found, along that specific stretch of Gilgo Beach and Ocean Parkway, some were within just, 200 feet of each other?
Yeah, very close in some cases.
That kind of proximity, especially in such a desolate area, it just doesn't feel random, does it?
No, not at all. It strongly suggests a familiarity with the area, a deliberate choice of location for disposal.
Like they knew the place.
It implies the killer likely knew that stretch of coastline well. Maybe felt it offered isolation or, a lower risk of being found quickly.
Now, there's a figure who drew a lot of attention, though, for sort of complicated reasons. James Burke.
The former Suffolk County police chief.
Yeah. He was eventually convicted on unrelated corruption charges, right?
Yeah.
But the theories around him, his potential involvement or maybe obstruction of the LISK investigation, they really took hold in the public imagination. Why do you think that happened?
Well, look, in high-profile cases like this, especially when there are big delays in arrests or people perceive the investigation was mishandled,
Which Manny did.
right, it's almost natural for suspicion and, frankly, conspiracy theories to pop up, particularly when a figure in authority, like the police chief, faces their own legal problems.
Oh.
It just creates this narrative, doesn't it? Potential cover-ups, hidden agendas.
Makes sense, even if unproven in relation to LISK. Okay, then fast forward. July 2023.
The arrest.
The arrest of Rex Horman. 59-year-old architect,
Right.
lives in Massapequa Park, not far away.
Charged with the murders of 3 of the first 4, Melissa, Megan, and Amber.
And the evidence presented so far, it includes DNA from, of all things, a pizza crust, allegedly linking him to the crime scenes.
Yeah, discarded pizza crust DNA and cell phone data, pinging his phone near the disposal sites around the time the victims disappeared.
We also heard about how his wife and children were apparently out of state during some crucial periods.
Right. And then the search of his home. Finding things like belts, reports of a soundproof room, sketches, disturbing items.
After so many years of nothing, this felt like a major breakthrough. What was your first reaction when that news broke?
Look, the arrest of Hoyerman was obviously a huge development. It offered a tangible suspect after just years and years of uncertainty.
Finally, a face.
Right. And the DNA evidence, if it's definitively linked, like the prosecution claims, that's a powerful piece of the puzzle. But it's crucial to remember, an arrest isn't a conviction. And the investigation is still very much active, especially concerning the other victims.
Absolutely. Which brings us nicely to all the theories still swirling around these killings. One of the biggest questions, did Hoyerman act alone?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Given the range of victims, we talked about the male victim, the toddler, is it really possible more than one person was involved?
It's certainly a possibility investigators have to be exploring. I mean, the diversity of the victims, that really extended timeline,
Right.
it could suggest multiple perpetrators.
Or maybe a single perpetrator whose methods, or perhaps targets, evolved over that long period. It's really a question of where the evidence ultimately leads. Single actor or something more complex.
And that theory about a law enforcement connection, maybe involving Burke, maybe a cover-up. You still hear people talking about it.
Right.
What would actually need to be uncovered to give that idea more, actual weight?
Well, to move it beyond just theory and speculation, you'd need concrete evidence. Something directly linking law enforcement officials like Burke or others, either to the murders themselves or to a proven intentional obstruction of justice related to these cases.
Like what kind of evidence?
Could be credible witness testimony, maybe forensic evidence we don't know about, or even official documents, emails, something concrete, not just rumor.
Gotcha. Then there's the more sort of local theory. Someone living right there on Long Island. Someone with deep knowledge of the area.
Yeah, the idea of someone whose work might put them in those isolated spots. A fisherman, maybe. A landscaper. Park ranger. How could someone like that, with that kind of local awareness, potentially evade detection for so long?
Well, extensive local knowledge would be a huge advantage, wouldn't it? Selecting secluded spots, knowing the terrain, maybe even understanding law enforcement patrol patterns or blind spots.
Somebody who just blends in.
Exactly. Someone whose presence in those environments is routine, so they wouldn't necessarily appear suspicious.
Now, it's also been noted there are potential links, maybe to other unsolved cases, like those homicides down in Atlantic City.
The Atlantic City 4, yeah, back in 2006. And also the murder of Jessica Taylor, whose partial remains were actually found on Long Island before the Gilgo Beach discoveries, and more later near Manorville.
Right. Now, these links, they're not definitively proven across the board, are they?
Not definitively, no, but there have been reports of DNA similarities mentioned in some instances, which is certainly unsettling.
If these cases are connected, what would that suggest?
Well, if proven, links to other unsolved cases would paint a picture of a potentially much wider pattern of criminal activity. Maybe the same individual or individuals crossing state lines, maybe targeting similar victim profiles in different areas.
It would open up whole new avenues for investigation.
Definitely. And the potential for sharing forensic evidence between jurisdictions.
We can't forget those chilling, taunting calls made to Melissa Barthelomy's family.
From that payphone near Penn Station.
Yeah. What does that specific detail, the calls themselves and the location, tell us about the person behind these crimes?
The calls themselves, as we said, point to someone calculated, cruel, someone who gets psychological satisfaction from the family's suffering.
Just awful.
And using a public payphone. Well, that suggests planning again. An awareness of avoiding personal phone records, trying not to leave a digital trail back then.
Okay, but here we are. It's April 2025, despite the arrest of Hoyerman.
Still no full confession.
Right. And the DNA evidence, while significant for the 3 charges against him, isn't universally tied to all the victims found along Ocean Parkway. His trial is pending. So many questions are still just hanging there. What do you see as the biggest hurdles now in getting to the full truth?
I think the biggest hurdles probably involve definitively linking Hoyerman or anyone else to all the victims, especially the unidentified ones like Peaches and her daughter and the Asian male victim John Doe number 6.
In figuring out the full scope of the activities.
Exactly. And the lack of a concession means investigators are going to have to rely really heavily on circumstantial evidence, forensic evidence, maybe digital forensics now, to build that complete case.
Yeah.
And to really understand the motivations behind these horrific acts.
The impact, though. The impact of these murders on Long Island itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's been profound, hasn't it? It really shook that community's sense of peace.
Oh, absolutely. Residents became more aware, maybe more fearful. How does a case like this change a whole community?
Well, a case of this magnitude, it can really erode that basic sense of safety and security. It forces people to confront the reality of violent crime, right in their own backyard.
Leads to increased vigilance, maybe?
Yeah, but also fear, anxiety,
Yeah.
and sometimes, unfortunately, it can lead to stigma and prejudice against certain groups who might be seen as more vulnerable or somehow connected, however unfairly.
That's true.
But the advocacy of the victims' families, it's been just incredible. Murray Gilbert, Shanann's mother, before she tragically passed away herself.
And Amanda Barthélemy, Melissa's sister, and so many others.
They fought tirelessly. For answers, yes, but also for better handling of missing persons cases overall, especially, as we mentioned, those involving sex workers. How important has their fight been in just keeping this case in the public eye?
Oh, absolutely crucial. You can't overstate it. Their relentless advocacy kept the pressure on law enforcement.
Yeah.
They raised public awareness constantly, and they humanized the victims, didn't they? Made sure they weren't just names or statistics.
I'm sure they weren't forgotten.
Exactly. And their efforts also highlighted these systemic issues, the need for reforms in how missing persons cases, especially sensitive ones, are handled.
In this case, it also exposed some really troubling issues within the Suffolk County Police Department itself, didn't it?
Yeah.
Which led to subsequent reforms. What does that tell us about the complexities of these really long-term, difficult investigations?
It highlights the importance of accountability, doesn't it? And the need for constant evaluation and improvement within law enforcement agencies. These long-term cases are incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
And it's just essential to learn from past mistakes, adapt strategies as new information or technology comes along.
And things like documentaries, podcasts, like this deep dive right now, they've played a pretty significant role too, haven't they? Keeping the story alive, reaching new people, sometimes even maybe prompting new leads.
I think so. Media attention can be a bit of a double-edged sword, though.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it's great. It can help maintain public interest, maybe encourage witnesses who haven't come forward yet, and it holds authorities accountable to some extent.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's really crucial for the media to be responsible, avoid sensationalism that could actually harm the investigation or, re-traumatize the victims' families all over again.
That's a very important balance. Now, there's a planned memorial walk, I understand, along Ocean Parkway, coming up in June 2025.
Yeah, I heard about that.
It feels like a really powerful way for the community to remember the people who were lost and to continue that call for justice.
Memorials like that, they serve as such important reminders of the human cost of these crimes. They provide a space for the community to come together, offer support to the families, and just reaffirm that commitment to finding justice for everyone.
Okay, so let's bring it right up to date.
Yeah.
As we're recording this, April 2025, the case is still very much active.
Absolutely. Rex Hoyerman's trial is looming. DNA, witness testimony that's expected to be key for the 3 murders he's currently charged with.
But investigators are pushing forward on other fronts too, aren't they? It's not just about Hoyerman now.
No, definitely not. The investigation continues on multiple levels. While, yes, the focus is heavily on the upcoming trial for those specific charges, efforts are also underway using really advanced forensic techniques now.
Like next-gen sequencing.
Exactly. Things like genetic genealogy, next-generation sequencing, to finally identify the remaining unidentified victims, putting names to John Doe, number 6, to Peaches and her daughter. That's a huge priority.
And we've also learned recently about a tip Right, from a fisherman.
Oh.
About a suspicious boat seen near Gilgo Beach way back in the late 1990s.
Yeah, that's fascinating. A lead from that long ago now being actively investigated. It just shows, doesn't it? Even years later, some seemingly small detail could turn out to be significant.
It really could. And that memorial walk in June, that's also seen as something that might potentially generate new information.
Mm.
Plus, the Crime Stoppers reward, that's still active.
Right. And it's vital, as you said, to remember, despite the arrest, there have been no convictions yet in connection with all the Gilgo Beach murders. What does that ongoing work tell you about just how complex this case still is?
Well, the fact that they're still actively chasing leads from decades ago, using cutting-edge science on unidentified remains, it just underscores the immense complexity and also the commitment, hopefully, to uncovering the truth for all the victims.
Yeah, it highlights that even with a suspect in custody for some of the murders, the larger mystery, who else might have been involved, if anyone, what's the full timeline? That remains open.
So the haunting question really does remain, who is the Gilgo Beach killer? Or killers? Well, 2023 brought that significant arrest. The full story is clearly far from being told. The hope, I guess, is that these ongoing efforts in 2025 will finally bring some measure of justice for everyone who was lost.
Shanann, Melissa, Maureen, Megan, Amber.
And the unidentified individuals whose stories we're still trying piece together. Their families just deserve closure after so many years of absolute anguish.
The pursuit of justice for each and every single victim has to be paramount. The pain, the uncertainty their families have endured, it's just unimaginable. The hope is that the ongoing investigation, the trial, the new science, it will ultimately provide them with the answers and the closure they so desperately need.
So if you listening right now, if you have any information at all, no matter how small or insignificant you think it might seem, please contact the Suffolk County Police Department. The number is 1-800-220-TIP-PS. Or reach out to Crime Stoppers. Your call really could be the missing piece.
Yeah, even the smallest detail could be crucial in helping finally solve this enduring mystery.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the Long Island serial killer case.
Thank you for engaging with this really important and sadly still ongoing story.
You know, with these new forensic tools being deployed and these old leads like the fisherman's tip resurfacing, could the key to unlocking the full truth about Gilgo Beach lie in some detail that's just been overlooked for years? It's a chilling thought, isn't it? One that continues to linger.